Have you ever felt so overwhelmed by life's challenges that you wondered if there was any way out, any clear path through the chaos, or any faint glimmer of hope on the other side? Sometimes the struggle feels impossible to bear, and in those moments everything inside you cries out for intervention. You know you can't overcome it alone, and you suspect that only a power far greater than yourself can shatter the walls that hem you in. Now imagine realizing that you are never truly alone, and that there is someone who steps into the fray to do battle on your behalf. That knowledge changes everything. It shifts your perspective from helpless victim to bold overcomer, because there's nothing more reassuring than embracing the truth that God fights for you. When your heart latches onto that promise, storms start to feel smaller, and the shadows shrink as a new light breaks through. Today, let's explore that light. Let's walk together into a sacred space where divine power meets human weakness. And let's discover the life-altering impact of believing that God stands guard over our destiny. It's a truth that can transform your journey, embolden your faith, and anchor you in the unwavering certainty that you are fiercely protected by the ultimate defender. Sometimes we walk through life with a secret burden pressing on our shoulders, a weight of uncertainty and fear that we can't quite explain. The future looms, and we wonder if we have what it takes to endure. Our hearts grow weary with worry, and our minds fight exhaustion as we try to figure out strategies to break free from the struggles we face. We might read self-help books, or seek the counsel of well-meaning friends who speak encouragement into our lives, telling us to stay strong, fight harder, and never give up. While these can be empowering words, what happens when your strength is gone, or when fighting harder only leads to deeper fatigue? You can push with all your might and still hit that roadblock again and again, and you begin to wonder if you are destined to stay stuck forever. But there is a powerful message woven throughout the story of humanity. There's a God who battles on behalf of those who trust him. The idea is not that we sit back and do nothing, nor that we never face any challenge, but that ultimately, when the obstacles loom too large and your personal resources run dry, God steps in with a force that goes beyond your wildest imagination. He is not a distant observer who watches you flounder, waiting for you to be perfect or to have it all together before he moves. Instead, his nature is to protect, defend, and fight for those who rely on him. It's like a child knowing that when they cry out, a loving parent will come rushing, eager to help, not out of obligation, but out of fierce love. It's the same dynamic on a much grander scale. An all-knowing, all-powerful God who answers your call in remarkable ways, leading you to places of freedom you never even dreamed possible. People throughout history have testified to this reality. They tell stories of impossible odds turning around in their favor, of closed doors suddenly opening, of heavy burdens lifting in a moment that defies logical explanation. They speak of a miraculous healing that baffles doctors, a financial breakthrough that arises just when the last dollar is spent, a broken relationship that mends against all hope, or a fierce spiritual battle that ends in peace. These testimonies go beyond simple chance or coincidence and speak of a divine hand that intervenes precisely when human strength has been depleted. When you hear those accounts, something stirs within you. You might wonder, could that really happen to me? Is it possible that God is so personally involved that he wages war on my behalf? Such a question might spark even deeper reflections. If God fights for you, does that mean you'll never face hardship or that everything becomes easy? Not necessarily. The process of life still unfolds, and every person deals with their share of pain and uncertainty. But it's in those moments of trial that the powerful reality of God's intervention shines brightest. There's a mysterious interplay between your willingness to stand in faith and the mighty power of a God who refuses to let evil prevail. In that intersection lies a level of hope that can revolutionize how you approach adversity. You come to see each valley not as a place of abandonment, but as a stage set for a divine breakthrough. Within Scripture, we find countless examples of God stepping in to fight for His people. Time and time again, battles that seemed unwinnable ended in victory, not because of human might, but because of God's direct intervention. At the Red Sea, when certain death loomed for an entire nation, one miraculous moment changed everything. At Jericho, the impossible walls stood tall, yet they crumbled under divine strategy. The giant Goliath fell at the hand of a shepherd boy who believed that his God was more formidable than any earthly threat. These are not just ancient stories meant to amuse or impress. They carry a truth that echoes through generations. Human limitations are no match for divine providence when God chooses to stand guard over those who place their trust in Him. Yet you might wonder, how does this translate into my modern life? Maybe you're not facing literal giants or physical armies, but you have battles in your mind, heart, family, health, and finances. Every day might feel like a war zone of conflicting emotions and crushing responsibilities. You might be standing at a metaphorical Red Sea, uncertain of how to cross the treacherous gap that stretches between your present despair and your future hope. Or you might be circling your own personal Jericho, confronted by walls of rejection, fear, or doubt that seem absolutely insurmountable. You might sense you have the heart of a warrior, yet the battlefield is so complex that you don't know how to wield your weapons effectively. When you realize that God fights for you, it changes your posture on the battlefield. You no longer march into conflict with the mindset that you are entirely on your own. Instead, you walk confidently, aware that a higher power has already secured the path ahead. This doesn't mean you become passive. Rather, you become a partner in a sacred dance of faith and trust. You take steps forward, you pray, you believe, and in doing so, you invite God's intervention. This partnership aligns you with a force beyond your strength. There'll be a stirring in your spirit, a holy assurance that whispers, you are not doing this alone, and you are not at the mercy of circumstances. You are under the shelter of a divine canopy, a banner of protection and victory that hovers over your life. Still, one of the greatest hurdles is often believing that God actually cares enough to get personally involved in your struggles. Doubt sneaks in, telling you that maybe God fights for others, but not for you. Perhaps you think you're too flawed, too unworthy, or you've made too many mistakes. That mindset can derail your faith, causing you to shrink back instead of pressing forward. Yet the consistent message of grace is that it's never about how perfect you are or how flawlessly you live. God's heart is moved by authenticity, by a broken spirit that cries out in earnest need. Throughout sacred texts, we see repeatedly that God responds to genuine cries for help, no matter how messy or broken the person might feel. Indeed, It is in the midst of that brokenness that the beauty of God's intervention is most profoundly displayed. Perhaps you have questioned whether your challenges are too trivial to warrant divine attention, or maybe too big and too complicated. The remarkable reality is that God's capacity is infinite, and nothing lies outside the scope of His understanding or His ability to move. Whether your battle is a quiet internal struggle with anxiety or a large-scale crisis affecting your entire family, God is not limited by scale. He sees the secrets of the heart as clearly as He sees the storms that rage around you. He does not grow weary, He does not falter, and He does not abandon those who cling to Him. When you sit in this place of trust, fear loses its grip. You realize that the depth of God's compassion matches the magnitude of His power, and in that combination, all impossibilities collapse. The act of recognizing that God fights for you is intimately tied to letting go of the need to control every outcome. As humans, we often feel safer when we're at the wheel, charting our course, making meticulous plans, and figuring out every contingency. Yet, a willingness to let God fight for you means you accept that your mortal perception is limited and that there is a divine vantage point you cannot fully grasp. It's a relinquishing of control, not in a defeatist sense, but in a posture of humility that recognizes there is far more happening in the spiritual realm than meets the eye. When your heart shifts from self-reliance to dependence on a steadfast God, a supernatural peace can overshadow anxiety. Even when circumstances remain stormy, you find a calm that defies logic, because you know the one who leads you is not bound by the laws of nature or the constraints of human intellect. Yet this journey of trust is rarely linear. Often it's a cycle of drawing close, stepping out in faith, stumbling in doubt, and then returning once more to that place of refuge. Each time you make that return, you discover that God remains steadfast, unchanging, ready to defend you anew. Yet this journey of trust is rarely linear. Often it's a cycle of drawing close, stepping out in faith, stumbling in doubt, and then returning once more to that place of refuge. Each time you make that return, you discover that God remains steadfast, unchanging, ready to defend you anew. Each crisis can become an opportunity to deepen your trust in the one who stands guard. When you begin to recall how God carried you through past battles, you cultivate gratitude, and that gratitude amplifies your faith. You start to see patterns of divine faithfulness, realizing that you have never truly walked alone through any hardship, even if at times you felt alone. That realization becomes a source of courage, and it shapes your perspective for future struggles. Another vital aspect of God fighting for you is understanding that His methods may differ from your expectations. You might have a particular strategy in mind, but God often chooses an entirely different route to bring deliverance. Perhaps you envision a swift and direct victory, yet God might choose a longer, more intricate process that refines you along the way. Sometimes it's only in hindsight that you recognize the wisdom of this path. In the moment, you may feel perplexed, wondering why a certain situation lingers or why your prayers seem unanswered. Then, at the exact right time, the breakthrough emerges in a way that leaves no doubt as to who orchestrated it. This dynamic not only fosters trust in God's power, but also humbles the human heart. It reminds you that you are part of a much larger narrative, one in which God's timing and understanding far exceed your own. There's also a corporate dimension to consider. God fighting for you doesn't only benefit you personally. When God delivers one individual, that person's testimony can ignite hope in others. Like a spark that spreads through dry grass, faith can become contagious. When you share the story of how an impossible challenge turned into a miraculous triumph, you plant seeds of expectation in the hearts of those who listen. They, too, may begin to trust more deeply and pray more boldly, catching a glimpse of divine intervention that might have previously seemed far-fetched. Your individual victory resonates as part of a symphony of grace, weaving together the stories of countless lives God touches and redeems. It's a powerful reminder that while God fights for you, He is also simultaneously weaving threads of freedom into a wide tapestry that binds us all together. Moreover, if God fights for you, there is a responsibility that accompanies that privilege. You become a steward of the grace you receive. As you stand victorious on the other side of an adversity, you gain wisdom and compassion that you can pour into the lives of others who are still in the thick of their battle. Knowing firsthand that God shows up and defends the vulnerable, you become an agent of encouragement. You can speak life into places where despair once resided. The comfort you've received turns into the comfort you offer, and that becomes a transformative cycle. Rather than hoarding the blessings of a battle won, you extend the gifts of empathy, prayer, and active help, thereby partnering with God to fight for someone else in their hour of need. All of this unfolds in the framework of a God who is intimately involved with His creation. He is not a distant, dispassionate force, but a personal being who engages, intervenes, and invests himself in the well-being of those who look to Him for strength. Sometimes the evidence of His involvement is subtle, like a gentle nudge in your spirit, or a series of small coincidences that line up perfectly. Other times, it's as dramatic as a door flung open at the last possible second, or a mountain that seems to move overnight. Regardless of the form it takes, the outcome remains the same. You recognize that forces beyond human effort played a decisive role, and you stand in awe of a God who steps down from the heavens to speak into the chaos of your personal life. This awe becomes the backdrop against which your faith flourishes. The realization that God fights for you can become the central narrative around which all other stories in your life are told. Your heartbreaks, setbacks, and daily irritations no longer define you. Rather, they become opportunities for God's strength to be made perfect in your weakness. You begin to live from a place of acceptance that you can't control every battle. You can't predict every outcome, but you can trust a defender who sees what you cannot see. In that trust, you find rest. You don't have to exhaust yourself trying to win every fight by your own ingenuity. Instead, you do what you can. You make wise choices. You maintain hope, and you leave the final results to a power that is limitless. In the quiet hours of your life, when questions swirl in your mind and the odds seem stacked against you, remember that the conversation is not over until God speaks. He has a final say, and that say echoes the truth of His nature. He is for you, not against you. When you cling to that reality, you discover new strength welling up within you, not because your circumstances are perfect, but because you know you are not alone. This spiritual dynamic has a remarkable impact on mental and emotional well-being as well. Fears that once paralyzed you lose much of their force when weighed against the immensity of divine help. Despair that once clouded your vision lifts under the brightness of a grace that reassures you of eventual victory. Though trials may remain for a time, they no longer hold you captive. At times, people imagine that if God fights for us, we can sit back and passively watch life unfold, expecting no involvement on our part. But genuine faith is not passive. It is an active reliance that spurs you to move forward, to try again, to pursue solutions in tandem with God's power. When you truly believe that God is on your side, you are motivated to make bold decisions. You dare to dream larger, to pray with more passion, and to step out in ways that once felt terrifying. This is because the possibility of failure is overshadowed by the possibility of supernatural assistance. Even if things don't turn out exactly as you expect, you learn along the way, grow in faith, and become more attuned to the ways God might be guiding your steps. In essence, acknowledging that God fights for you takes you from a posture of defeat to a posture of expectation. You stop bracing for disaster and start looking for a breakthrough. Your prayers shift from anxious desperation to confident requests. You may still feel the tension of the struggle, but you now carry the awareness that you have a committed ally who never backs down. This perspective is radically different from the doom and gloom outlook that so many people carry. It's not about denying reality, nor is it about living in a fairy tale. It's about seeing a bigger reality, one that includes the active presence of the divine. Those who embrace this bigger reality often find a level of gratitude and joy that seems out of place in a world fraught with turmoil. They laugh in the face of difficulty, not because they are insensitive to pain, but because they trust that the story is not finished yet. They know there is a victor behind the scenes. This sense of confidence is contagious and can uplift entire communities. When one person stands tall in adversity, carried by the assurance of God's help, others witness it and begin to question their own assumptions. Maybe life isn't just about fighting lonely battles. Maybe there's a presence greater than all the darkness that surrounds us. That question can be the spark that ignites a renewal of hope in places once devoid of it. There is beauty in this unraveling of fear. As you grasp that you are defended by the ultimate protector, your own character transforms. You become more merciful, more patient, and more loving, precisely because you understand you have been treated with mercy, patience, and love by one far greater than yourself. This transformation is not a rigid demand, but a natural outcome of experiencing firsthand the care of God. If you've been rescued from dire situations, it's hard not to become a person who extends rescue to others in whatever small ways you can. If you've been freed from crippling fear, you naturally want to speak courage to people still shackled in doubt. The God who fights for you is not just concerned with grand-scale battles. Sometimes the fiercest wars take place within the inner recesses of your mind. Anxiety, depression, low self-esteem, and a sense of unworthiness can wage a relentless assault. Yet God meets you even there. He can replace lies with truth, fear with courage, and hopelessness with enduring faith. He penetrates the darkest corners of your soul with a light so radiant that it exposes every shadow. This internal transformation often precedes external breakthrough. As the battle within is won, you're better prepared to handle the external battles without wavering. The alignment of your heart with truth becomes a catalyst for sustained victory in every realm of life. Perhaps the most astonishing aspect of it all is that God's willingness to fight for you is not dependent on your achievements or your track record. You might feel defeated in areas of moral failings or repeated mistakes. Yet God is the God of second chances, third chances, and new beginnings. Perhaps the most astonishing aspect of it all is that God's willingness to fight for you is not dependent on your achievements or your track record. You might feel defeated in areas of moral failings or repeated mistakes, yet God is the God of second chances, third chances, and new beginnings. He is not looking to see how perfectly you've lived, but rather whether you are ready to yield your fights to Him. In that act of surrender, His power shines. He takes the shards of your broken efforts and crafts them into a story of restoration that leaves you in awe. It's a personal, transformative encounter that cannot be fully comprehended by logic alone. It's something you experience in the quiet place of your spirit, and it reverberates outward into the daily fabric of your life. God's track record is consistent, spanning centuries and touching countless lives. When you consider how many people have drawn on this truth and found Him faithful, you begin to realize that you too are invited into that lineage of trust. That invitation stands open, regardless of your past or present circumstances. It's never too late to let Him take up arms on your behalf. Even if you've resisted or run from Him before, the moment you call out in genuine humility and desperation, you join the throng of voices who have cried the same cry and found deliverance. In that moment, your story begins to align with a tapestry of redemption that stretches far beyond your limited view. You might only see your immediate struggle, but He sees the entire picture, how each battle connects to a divine purpose that surpasses your most far-reaching dreams. When you finally lay down your striving and accept that God Himself chooses to take up your cause, a weight lifts from your soul. It doesn't mean you become careless or inactive, but it does mean your heart finds a place of safety. The word rest might seem elusive in a high-pressure world, but rest is exactly what blossoms in the heart that believes the outcome is ultimately in God's hands. This rest is not laziness. It's a tranquility anchored in confidence and assurance that no matter how wild the storms rage, the final decree is authored by someone who deeply loves and protects you. That kind of rest empowers you to think clearly, love deeply, and live fully, even when the path seems arduous. As you journey forward, you may still face hardships, but each trial becomes an opportunity to watch God do what He does best: redeem, restore, and rescue. Each challenge is another story waiting to unfold, a new instance of grace waiting to be revealed. Knowing that God fights for you doesn't eliminate hardship, but it guarantees that hardship never has the final word. The final word belongs to the one who sees beyond time, beyond fear, and beyond human limitation. That is the profound hope that anchors your soul when life's currents threaten to pull you under. You cling to the knowledge that you are not alone, not forsaken, and not forgotten. The Maker of the universe has heard your call and rushed to your side. When you think about the possibility of divine intervention, it might feel lofty, even beyond your grasp. Yet the moment you open your heart to the reality that God fights for you, your entire perspective changes. You don't see defeat as the inevitable outcome. You don't let fear rewrite your destiny. You stand grounded in the assurance that a power beyond comprehension has pledged itself to your cause. That knowledge transforms your attitude, your prayers, and your capacity to persevere. You begin to see every obstacle through the lens of potential victory rather than certain failure. You embrace the truth that you have a guardian who neither slumbers nor fades, and who actively works for your good. This is the heartbeat of a life lived in faith, the realization that while challenges abound, you walk through them accompanied by an all-powerful defender. Though your battles may shift and change form over the years, you never stand alone on the field. God's presence envelops you, His love sustains you, and His power carries you. May that knowledge embolden you to face every storm with courage, and to live each day in the peaceful certainty that the final triumph has already been secured on your behalf.